Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
Yeah. Well, now I'm calling it Swagtime.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Swagtime. And so I'm trying to figure out the spirit of that road around the north side, for example. That sort of, when I feel that evocation, I just listen to it.
For people familiar with piano music, St. Louis music history, or ragtime, Scott Joplin is certainly a titan, as is his 1902 classic, The Entertainer. So it should come as no surprise that The Entertainer lives on as it was originally heard, but also in many adaptations, such as this one. And it just so happens that the musician behind that version of Scott Joplin's much-beloved work is none other than a young St. Louisan who's making music that puts new spins on the familiar, blends genres, and leaves you feeling energized and wondering, how did he come up with that? That composer and performer and 2016 St. Louis Teen Talent Competition winner is none other than Royce Martin. Royce, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So a lot of people are introduced to Scott Joplin's music and ragtime in general if they pick up learning piano, and it's usually The Entertainer. Now, is this the case, or was that the case for you? And was Joplin and his work sort of part of your musical upbringing, particularly here in St. Louis?
It's weird because I didn't exactly have a musical upbringing specifically because of St. Louis, or I didn't have a musical upbringing that was specifically tied to St. Louis music until a lot later. I started the piano when I was 14, and I must have heard The Entertainer various places throughout culture, maybe on shows, maybe on the radio once, definitely on an ice cream truck. But I started playing the piano, and I figured out this great story about Scott Joplin and his contemporaries who lived in St. Louis, and I felt I needed to tell the story of ragtime as the birth of American pop music. And so I got interested in The Entertainer and wanted to put that on my album.
Yeah. Did you say that you started when you were 14?
I started the piano at 14.
Wow. So was there a moment that you realized that you wanted to pursue music professionally and for ragtime to be part of what you did in that career?
I can't tell exactly when that happened, but that definitely happened. There was definitely a point where I figured out that I wanted ragtime to be a part of my musical persona. Maybe in 2020, I worked at the Scott Joplin House as an in-house pianist and almost like a lecturer about ragtime and its evolution through the 20th century into other popular styles. And in talking about that with one of my coworkers, TJ, he was telling me, he's like a historian himself, but he was telling me all these great things about the music. And in figuring that out, I got fascinated about the music such that I wanted to do the album and tell more people about what I thought was interesting about this music.
And at any point, I mean, did you ever feel sort of pressure to represent in that way?
Represent as a musician?
Yeah, represent as a musician, and to represent someone who has had such a significant place in your hometown?
Yes, definitely. That's definitely a part of it. I feel that St. Louis's connection to great American pop music could be told more in such a way that makes St. Louis a more attractive place, even aesthetically. I just rode around the north side, for example, and looked at just how decrepit a lot of places that could otherwise be beautiful places looked, and I felt like that was a mistake, especially considering this great cultural phenomenon like ragtime we have. So,
now, Royce, you definitely have a unique take on how you perform Ragtime. We heard a bit at the beginning with The Entertainer, which is undeniably one of the most well-known pieces of Joplin's work. It's also something that I kind of learned to do as I was fiddling on the piano. Let's take a listen, though, to another of his iconic bops, Maple Leaf Rag.
Nice.
That was Maple Leaf Rag, originally by Scott Joplin and performed by Royce Martin. Now, one of the things that made Scott Joplin the king of ragtime is that he was a classically trained, educated musician. And when ragtime was emerging, not many performers could write, let alone read music. So Joplin's work in a genre known for its ragged time signature, it made his sound very much his own. And he did leave notes on how quickly to play his music in the margins of the sheet music. What was it, and at what moment of playing Joplin did you realize, oh, this is my song now, and then sort of put your twist on it?
I can't tell you when that happens, but I know that I listen to the music and I pick certain pieces to put on the album based on how evocative I feel they are, which is to say that some pieces specifically from Scott Joplin's catalog evoke certain emotions in me in such a way that I feel compelled to put it on the album. And when I feel that evocation, I just listen to it. And what comes out sometimes is like Debussy, and other times it's like hip-hop music. I got a rap song on the album. And so, yeah, I'm constantly looking for new ways to finesse this music that makes it more appealing to a modern listener.
Mm-hmm. What does that process look like? So when you're listening, do you have like a notebook? Is your computer open in front of you? Like, do you record things?
I definitely record things on my phone. Voice Memos is a great app to get a lot of ideas out, but pretty much it's all in my head. Mm-hmm. I'm not I didn't write down any of the down any of the pieces and the changes that I made to any of the pieces for the pieces on Memories on Morgan Street.
Yeah.
So it's for the most part in my head.
And at what point do you know that what you've put together is at that point where it's ready to be recorded?
That's a great question. I can't exactly say that I know. I just know that I have deadlines to meet. And so I have to really hit the gas on my artistic process if I want to meet those deadlines sometimes.
Well, I think anybody who does creative work, including here, it helps to have a clock.
Right, exactly.
We're speaking with Royce Martin, who is a young St. Louisan and a musician and composer. He was the winner of the 2016 St. Louis Teen Talent Competition, and it's been some years since then. He has continued to make his own path with the music that he's not only performing, but that he's creating. So, every genre has fans who are purists, and they believe that any straying away from tradition as far as the sound or the culture means it's no longer sort of in that genre anymore. Maybe the way Yassine Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, said Drake is a pop artist and not a hip-hop artist. Do you think what you've done with Joplin's work on that album, Memories of Morgan Street, is still ragtime, or is it sort of in its own category?
It's ragtime, and I guess I take some problem with the ideology of the purists, and not necessarily for reasons that you might think. I think that the purist mindset can be useful if you are interested in going back. In the case of ragtime, you might be interested in going back in history and focusing on one episode of history, that is the ragtime era, let's say year 1898 up until 1917. And you could get so interested in that period that you make aesthetic choices based on it, and you dress like the people back in the day, and you even talk like it. But that's a different kind of historical attraction that some people have that I don't have. I'm interested in pushing the culture forward and thinking about ragtime as an idea, which is to say that these people were syncopating music that was previously not syncopated, and as a result of that, they changed music into American pop music. And so I'm trying to figure out the spirit of that instead of just copying it in a way that, is repackaged 1910 work in 2024.
Yeah.
So
What is syncopated?
yeah, so syncopation, without getting too theoretical about it and nerdy, it's like you have one beat that is steady, and then you superimposed a non-steady beat on top that emphasizes beats that aren't typically emphasized. So if I'm clapping on 1, 2, 3, 4, on the ands of those down beats, which are the strong beats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, if I emphasize those for long enough and steadily enough, you'll get this. Scott Joplin described it as a hypnotic effect, and that effect is the main characteristic of ragtime.
And that nerdiness is awesome. Hypnotic with a C, not with a Q.
Yeah.
So you released an album, you just talked about it, in October 2023. It's Memories on Morgan Street. And for those who don't know, when Scott Joplin lived in St. Louis, he stayed at a modest apartment at 2658 Morgan Street, which is now Del Mar in downtown West. And on your album, Royce, there is an interlude where you end up in a dreamland and you have a conversation with Scott Joplin, the king of ragtime. Let's listen to a snippet.
What if I told you that fate brought you here for a reason?
What's the reason?
Royce, I'm dying.
I thought you already did.
My legacy, Royce. Black American music, popular music. As I fade out of the memory of the culture, I lose my influence. With no influence, I can't connect with people like you.
But ragtime died over a century ago. I mean, don't you think it's a little late to try to save it?
Save it? It's not about resurrecting the past. We've come to a time where the culture has forgotten about originality. It's about finding the beauty that makes us who we are, Royce. Once upon a time, the United States didn't have a national voice. So folks just tried to turn her into another European parrot. If it wasn't the German waltz, it was the Irish jig. If it wasn't that, it was the Sousa March. Boy, did she love Sousa. She'd march herself to the end of the earth, beating her drum of so-called independence. But between the European march and hers, only an expert could tell the difference. Do you know when that changed, Royce?
When did March music change? The first day of April? I don't know.
It wasn't until all of those people who looked like you and I had been emancipated, until all the voices could contribute, that truly American popular music was born. Isn't that something? She could shout and shout about independence and freedom from the highest rooftop in the square, but nobody even heard her until she meant it. Our nation's music is an emblem of the freedom to express ourselves.
Wow. I guess I never thought of it that way.
That was Royce Martin speaking with the spirit or ghost, perhaps, of Scott Joplin in the interlude Dreamland on Royce's album, Memories on Morgan Street. We were having a lot of laughs throughout that. In the interlude, while in Dreamland, fictionalized Scott Joplin gives you orders to keep his legacy alive because American pop music and black music is dying. What makes you or the fictional ghost of Joplin believe that that is where black music is now?
So Joplin is worried about his legacy. You got that right. His legacy is pop music. Scott Joplin is the king of ragtime. Ragtime is the birth of American pop music, which I guess technically makes Scott Joplin the king of pop at the turn of the 20th century. So here he is worried about where the music went after his death. And the point that I'm making there is one about creativity being stifled by algorithms. And that's a larger take on what I think might be happening with social media and artists creating content as opposed to art. And so Scott Joplin is worried about this because his suspicion is that people are more likely to do what has proven successful in the past without actually channeling what speaks to them and projecting that into the world. And so he's telling me to do that. And if an artist is able to properly project what they feel, then that is actually the true spirit of what created this American pop music in the first place, which is this idea that everybody could contribute by telling their own unique stories, and the cornucopia of that giant story would be pop music, and pop music for democracy, pop music for everybody. So that's Joplin's legacy.
Popular music.
Popular music, right.
On your album, you have an original song which has some hint of the classic Joplin rag, The Entertainer, in there, and it's called Rags to Riches. Let's hear some of that.
I'm getting money, money, money. They wanna hate cause they see how we do. We came from nothing, struggling, hustling. I gotta stay on my grind cause I see all these dollar signs. She wanna love me, touch me, rub me, and try to date cause she see how we move. I'm getting money, money, money. I gotta stay on my grind cause I want all these dollar signs. Way back then, but now we all grown up. Stuffing money in my tummies, I'm the boss, Angelica. All these hotties monetize me, now I got my bands up. Paid my price, I earned my stripes, I'm king of America. Yeah, I'm up on my mommy, your girl call me handsome. Every time she at my show, I make her throw her hands up. Think I might be about to blow, I'm steady taking chances. Destiny stay on my phone, so I can't even answer. No, sir, I got ladies trying to chase me with a baby, woohoo. Every day we ride Mercedes, came from nothing. You just hate me cause they play me on the radio. She wanna date me but was flaky like a week ago. Migos Casa got me popping with my bros and came from nothing, we was stressed but now we blessed like I should. Yeah, I like to show my face, plus I get paid when I do. She said she love me cause I make her yodelay. I'm getting money, money, money.
Royce, Rags to Riches. What is the story behind this song?
There's an archetypal story that I think is very, very fascinating. We all feel called to it. I think it shapes our human character of aspiration. And that all sounds very vague and overly intellectual. But what I mean is this triumph archetype, I think Black Americans really embody that just as a narrative from the 20th century, from an enslaved people to now the richest Africans across the African diaspora. And so I think that fits like squarely into Joplin's idea about advancing the Black race and using ragtime as a soundtrack to do so. He's got this idea that this music that's associated with banjo music from the plantation could be used as a means for upward mobility for Black Americans. He's trying to integrate ragtime into Broadway and Tin Pan Alley, and is trying to sort of take his people to the next level because of it. And he actually writes an opera about that same theme, a young Black girl abandoned in superstition for education. So rags to riches is the archetype, nothing to something, zero to hero, rags to riches.
Yeah. Now, you have a particular interest in bringing old music to modernity. That is something that you talked about, and doing so in a way that's not corny. That was not corny. Like, we're sitting here sort of, vibing to that music. But the other thing that I'm thinking about insofar as hip hop is concerned, I mean, what makes what you do with Rags to Riches different from sampling? Or is that what you're doing?
It is that. And that's a good point, because this music, the hip hop, for example, is very much the same, or what creates hip hop is very much the same as I feel what is creating ragtime at the around the turn of the 20th century and a little bit before. You have these people looping over and over again a fragment of a piece that already exists. And in looping it that many times, it sort of becomes its own thing. And that is very similar to the sampling tradition in hip hop. You can take something that already exists and loop the same drum break, for example, over and over again. And that can become its own beat. And then you get an MC to stand up and tell a story on top of that, and then all of a sudden they're rapping and rhyming those words. And essentially that's the same thing that's happening with ragtime 100 years before. But I've been interested in the connection between those two things, ragtime, everything in between, all the way up to hip hop. So,
and the combination of those two, you have a name for.
Yeah. Well, now I'm calling it Swagtime.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Swagtime.
So, along with performing ragtime and writing your own music, you have a career in film scoring. Tell us about some of your more recent projects.
Yeah, so I just scored my first feature film, actually. They called him Mostly Harmless. It just premiered on Max, HBO streaming service, on February 8th. I was fortunate to score a lot of cool projects. I provided original music for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion special on HBO Max in 2020. I scored something called I just told you about that.
Yeah.
Mormon No More on Hulu. Don't watch it if you're Mormon, or maybe do watch it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Hulu series, and some other projects throughout the days. But
Yeah.
I got my degree in film scoring from Berkeley.
Okay. So, I mean, how is the creative process then for scoring a film different from what you do when you're writing your own music?
It's a more collaborative effort. I have to listen to a director when I'm scoring a film, and that's different from when I'm making a piece for myself or making a piece for an album or something like that. So it's a lot more collaborative. There are a lot more opinions to consider, and you have to consider the picture, what's actually happening in the film and telling a story. So yeah, I've been interested in that because I'm very interested in storytelling.
Yeah. Happy early birthday and congratulations. And thank you so much for talking with us
Thank
today.
you for having me.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.